And welcome back. It's now a minute away from 7 o'clock, and we've been joined by Dr. Kendra Flores-Carter, Doctor of Social Work and Research in the Social and Behavioral Science field, Maternal, Child, and Women's Health. And also, we've been joined by Kaylia Nunez, Ambassador, Founder of the Belize Brain Awareness Society. Good morning.
Morning.
And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks.
Now, Kaylia, let's talk a little bit about the Belize Brain Awareness Society. I know you've been around for a while and as an advocate for anything related to the brain, actually. Let's talk about your journey and why this society came about.
Well, my journey is very simple. I, at the age of 25 and 28, I had 2 brain aneurysm, which is, because some people would ask what it is, that's like a brain stroke. And it's whereby you're bleeding in your brain. And at the age of 29, I did 2 brain surgery, 2 weeks apart in Cuba. So that is my journey there. I have battled with I still battle with anxiety and depression. And so when it comes with the brain, I believe that I needed a voice for what I was going through. I needed an avenue, because when I was sick, I had nowhere, like I didn't heard about any society. So it became something to me that I said I wanted to create an era whereby I would find other persons such as myself. And at this present moment, I will say that I have conquered that goal. And my reason for that is because when I came back from doing my brain surgery and I was not really walking, I was leaning on my mother. People were watching me like it was something strange to see someone in that dismay. And what struck me was the fact that I needed to educate people that this is not my doing, that this was something that I was ill with and I genetically ill with. So that's the reason why I brought the Brain Society forward.
Do you work along with the Mental Health Association?
Yes, we do.
What's the relationship like between the two?
The relationship is very good. I can always call on them or ask them to do certain things with us. And also, we also share a board of director member, nurse Ingrid Bonilla. So we work very closely together. And yeah.
What's your view of the way that people approach their own mental health in Belize?
For me, it's very negative. I watch a lot of, sometimes I watch so many news situations and people are making fun of persons that are mentally ill. Not to bash anyone or anything like that, but like with the recent case with the gentleman having intercourse with the pig, for me, I said, well, I know that person is sick. People found joy in that, in just finding fun out of that, not even realizing that, okay, that person needs help, and instead of us helping that person, we're there talking bad and making jokes just so that we can get likes on Facebook. And it's very sad because everyone has a mental state, but a lot of them don't come in grips of what it is that they have. But I have come in grips, and I'm telling people out there that I have anxiety, I have depression, but that doesn't make me less of a human being.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk a little bit to Dr. Carter, just to get your own journey as well. You said you're a Belizean who left home. Why go the route of being with your doctorate, the area of study that you have?
Well, I mean, I actually started out just as an admissions coordinator for telecare corporations in LA. And what I did was just an admissions coordinator for a subacute mental health facility. And I really enjoyed working with people that were, suffering from mental health issues. And so what happened is that had a supervisor that was so on me to say, okay, I don't just want you to have a bachelor's, I want you to go back, I see the potential in you. And so she encouraged me to go and get my master's, and I did eventually. And I worked for 7 years in a hospital setting, and over, I think, maybe the 7th year of working that job, I started getting a lot of women who were having postpartum depression, who were having depression during pregnancy, and then like the mental health came again.
Yeah.
So I started out working with mental health, and then I went into healthcare, and then the mental health kept coming up, and I just really, it's my niche. I really love working with people who have mental health issues, and I feel like connecting them to services and really working to help them get better and have hope that they're not stuck in that situation was important for me. And so just working towards that, I think one of my expert areas really just working and educating people and bringing awareness to mental health issues, the stigma around mental health, and really wanting to reach the community and let them understand that we really need to help individuals instead of, as Kayla mentioned, instead of being negative. We need to help them so that they could reach their full potential. I mean, we all want to reach our full potential, right?
We come from a society, especially in Belize, where traditionally people would lock away anyone who is, suffering any kind of mental issues. You talk about stigma even there, but is it a part of the human condition that being different, and especially walking around with something that is not visible for people to say, okay, this is your issue, that there's always a fear that there'll be greater judgment and more ridicule?
Yeah, I mean, there's a shame. There's a significant shame attached to being mentally ill because it's brought upon by society. My family personally suffered. My aunt had schizophrenia, which is one of the reasons that I created my organization, the Janet Don't Cry Foundation, because I really wanted to bring more attention. Like, we need to stop doing this. We really need to stop. My aunt was a teacher. She held a career for many years, but there are certain times when she had breakdowns, and it was during those times that I did see where the treatment of her was so negative. People teased her, "Oh, you're crazy." They didn't have the accommodations to really help her rehabilitate her, and so they did lock her away. And sometimes, it was, you're in a hospital, you're just going to be locked away in a room and pumped with antipsychotics because we need to keep you like stabilized or whatever the case may be. And so just the treatment of people who are mentally ill is not really adequate. From her, it was definitely not adequate. I mean, she ended up dying in a situation where we felt like she was probably just being pumped with antipsychotics and really not being medically cared for the way that she needed to be cared for. And so it becomes kind of like a ripple effect of a lot of other situations, because if you don't know how to properly treat someone who has mental illness, how to have the necessary places for them to go to receive the treatment from the professionals, then it becomes definitely.
Have you had the opportunity to, there's this perception, even in my head, that America has all the facilities, all the expertise, all the treatment facilities in the world, probably some of the best, I don't know.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Sure.
But have you had the opportunity to compare a little bit of what is there in abundance to the state of Belize's mental health care system?
Of course. I mean, there's definitely a
assessment?
significant lack of a lot of the resources. My understanding is there is not even an urgent care specifically dedicated to mental health.
An urgent care?
A mental health urgent care, where if someone is really a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or gravely disabled, they can actually go into a crisis center that's just dedicated for mental health. They go into that crisis center, they get assessed by a psychiatrist, a social worker, an RN, and then they determine whether or not they meet the criteria to then be hospitalized and go into a higher level of care, which is like an acute psychiatric facility. So of course, Belize doesn't have any of those things, but one of the reasons that I wanted to come back is really provide that sort of education, and if someone wants to kind of collaborate and work and figure out, well, how do we do this, right? I've had a lot of history working in facilities like this, so I'm not the expert at it, but I'm sure I have some ideas. And if, people are really willing to open and say, well, let's see what you have to say. How can we create something like this? How can, we gain some new perspective on how to look at mentally ill? I mean, I remember watching the news with a man that was placed in a jail cell, and he, this guy clearly was schizophrenic or had a significant mental health issue, and this is a type of person that will go into a mental health crisis, urgent care, gets assessed, and the psychiatrist probably would determine, well, based on the symptoms, he meets the criteria to be hospitalized on a 5150, and then placed in a facility that will cater to his needs and really help to rehabilitate him so that he's able to get back to his baseline with his medication and everything else.
America isn't it has all these facilities, but every so often we still hear these.
Oh yeah, of course.
And the scale of the breakdowns in America, the violent breakdowns are
significant.
Are very significant. My question is, America, with all of those facilities and all the expertise, still has these major breakouts. How do you think Belize has been coping? How have we been able to cope with mental health without all of these things?
Well,
what is the danger of not having them?
Well, I think, we know that what happens with people who are mentally ill, they progressively get worse. And a lot of the times people do lock them away, so you don't see them. I remember when I was growing up, they had Rockview. I don't know, is that facility still here? And at least they had that somewhere where they can take them away. I don't know how Belize is coping, but I do know that the stories that do come out is really sometimes very negative. And a lot of people maybe hide what's really going on. They don't talk about what's really going on. And so it's important to really figure out how to help people. And a lot of people probably live with being depressed. It's just a daily thing. And what people don't understand is a lot of the times people get strokes and heart attack because of depression, because it manifests eventually into actual physical condition, medical and physical condition, right? So if you're going through your life significantly depressed, eventually, if you don't deal with all of that, pop, and then you get a stroke or a heart attack. So it's so important that people live with depression every single day, and eventually they just pop, and that might be a significant medical issue. That's how you cope. You get sick, you get really ill.
Now, when you're talking about depression, it's very difficult to diagnose. And in a society where people think that you're just moody or something else, even those who are suffering may not be able to recognize it. We're not a society that, you can go to a doctor and say, I'm depressed, and they'll necessarily give you medication to cope, etc. Is that a good or a bad thing? Because obviously in the US, you also have a lot of people who everybody's clinically depressed and on something, right? So where do you strike the balance? And how do you move from a society that doesn't understand it to at least recognize it and to take some actions?
Well, I think that it's important to understand the process and it's the screening process to figure out, is a person mildly depressed, is a person moderately depressed, or is a person significantly depressed? And in order to figure that out, you have to use the right screening tools. And so there's different types of depression tools that you can actually assess a person to find out where their state is. And so if we're just getting feedback from someone who's just telling you stuff, then you don't really understand. But if you give them an actual assessment that's, researched and tested to actually get the information about depression, then you actually are able to really understand the dynamics of it. And so you can determine what range this person falls into and what services that they need to be rendered to kind of get back to their baseline or normal way of functioning. A lot of times people don't understand that there's severity and there's levels to a lot of the things that we experience. And so someone who's mildly depressed might not need to be on medication. They might just probably need to talk about whatever it is that's going through and do some talk therapy, as opposed to someone who's significantly depressed. The brain's already kind of changed its the chemical imbalance and things like that. Then they might need medication to kind of bring it back to the baseline. to level out, whatever it is that's going on with the chemical imbalances.
Is there any age-specific risks for mental illness? Is it because you think, okay, well, young people are not going to worry about. People who are older have nothing to worry about. So it's probably a working population that has the highest incidence of mental health issues. But is it age specific?
I know for schizophrenia, you can get triggered at the end, towards your end of adolescence, early 20s. So that's mainly the kind of cycle, or mainly the age range that people actually get their first breakdown of schizophrenia is between the ages of probably 17 to like 25. We don't know why that happens, but for a lot of people, that's the ages in between where something is triggered and they have a breakdown. For depression, I mean, that's throughout life. I mean, you can have a depressed 10-year-old. That's probably having significant issues in the home, food insecurities, things like that could really affect a child, their functioning in school. So depression is really across the board to the elderly, people getting older, feeling that they're no longer independent, they're losing that. So that, also is where people can kind of feel inadequate. And so it's depression is probably across the board. Anxiety often kind of is comorbid with depression.
It's
so comorbid, like it happens co-occurringly, together. So you kind of have some depression symptoms and anxiety symptoms going on at the same time for most people. So,
in Belize, as you're talking, it went back to something that Will said, which was, we just completely mistreat this thing. He was referring to locking people up, but I can remember being younger, and the treatment for somebody, a 10-year-old who was depressed, was go do some work, or you get a spanking. How much does mistreatment at that age grow into something which is much worse later on? Because Belize, we just say toughen up. I mean, we're a country that, we don't have as much pressure as some of the developing countries. I was talking to my uncle yesterday, and I was complaining about a couple of bills, and he said, "Why the Belize don't got bills? I can remember 3 bills in Belize: water bill, light bill, and rent. Over here, you have bill for everything." So going back, the question is, how does the mistreatment that we think is cultural treatment, the toughen up culture, how does that exaggerate and affect the progress, deterioration actually?
Yeah, well, I think that you have to be very careful because you cannot mistreat without a buffering, and you shouldn't mistreat at all actually. And I think that we really need to nurture our children, and we try to help them to progress and have an innocent upbringing as possible. I think for most people, a lot of the times, we do pressure some of the kids to grow up fast. I need you to help me and do this and do that. But I think it's important to understand that kids are kids, and we have to let them do kid-appropriate things. Significant mistreatment can definitely lead to a child becoming depressed, a child having anxiety in school, things like that. So it's so important for us to understand that we don't overdo it. I think discipline is good, but when you take it really far, then it can definitely traumatize your child. And that trauma is really what creates a ripple of other things that comes from it.
Now, I like what you're saying in terms of especially dealing with children, but isn't there a mounting pressure because we feel that everything is so finite? To get into the best schools, you have to, train them in a particular way or encourage them to perform at their best all the time. And I think that's where the world is going, especially with social media. You're constantly, if you're in that world, measuring yourself to other people, how they look, how they dress, what things they have, etc. That there's almost an uncensored approach to this pressure to be perfect and to be better than everyone else. So how do you encourage parents to manage that for their children? And I think in some cases it may be more difficult for girls because they have to be prettier, perfect, more than a boy would, for example.
Well, I mean, I'm a mother, so it's definitely difficult. I have a 10-year-old, now 11-year-old, and she always comes to me with a lot of, oh, mommy, I don't feel pretty, or why is my hair not straight? So like little things like that, and they do notice their peers. My children, they go to a school where it's predominantly Hispanic and white. And so they are the only black kids in the school pretty much. It's probably a handful of black kids because I live in a city that's predominantly Hispanic. So it's really difficult. But I really talk to my daughter and I let her know that I love you, for who you are. You're brilliant, you're smart. And I really do a lot of words of encouragement. I have my children do affirmation, which is just saying, I am beautiful, I am smart, I am intelligent. And I have them do this all the time whenever they come and they're depressed. My oldest, she used to get bullied, and I really teach her to stand up to herself, to be strong and say, you know what, you're not gonna bully me. I'm gonna go, tell the teacher, tell your mommy, because then I'm gonna go. So we have to be advocates for our kids too when we feel like there's influences that are negative, because there is a lot of negative outside influences. I am blessed to have like communication with my kids, so they tell me everything, sometimes too much. But and parents, encourage your children to talk. Don't shut them down. Listen, because a lot of the times kids want to tell you what's going on, but sometimes we're too busy as parents that we're not paying attention, and we need to be encouraging of them venting. My time is driving in the car. How was your day at school? They're like, Mommy, you ask us this every day, but that's the time. I have this 20 to 30 minutes to drive home. What can I get, in this? Like, ask questions. Sometimes you're like, put on the radio. I'm like, no, I want to hear how your day went. Tell me how your day went, because that's important. I think communication, open communication with your children definitely is important, and it's helpful because you kind of get an idea of what's going on with them.
We don't come from a culture where children are allowed necessarily to express themselves. We see some changes in that, children should be seen and not heard kind of approach. So a lot of these things, as simple as they may sound, they may be counterintuitive for quite a number of people, because that's just not what you're accustomed to.
Yeah.
How do you get these changes? And in some cases, people look at it as a foreign culture. We don't get depressed. That's for Americans, and people who have time to worry about nothing. So how do you get that idea across to people?
Well, a lot of people probably don't know that they're depressed. They don't even know what it looks like. If you're going through your week and you're stressing about financial issues and that's all that's bothering you, how are you going to pay your bills, and that's affecting your mood, that's contributing to depression. And a lot of people don't know that. And so it's also, educating them about what they're experiencing and how they can kind of understand, what I'm suffering is this. Even in the States, I had clients that would tell me they're significantly stressed out. But when I gave them an assessment to assess them for depression, they were depressed. So they were going to say, oh, I'm stressed out. And they're not thinking that they're depressed or anything like, oh, no, I'm not depressed, I'm stressed out. But you give them an assessment and you look at the symptoms and they're clinically depressed. So there's a difference between that. Understanding what's going on with yourself is often very hard, right? So a lot of people might not think they're going through what they're going through, but they really are.
When you say that somebody's depressed, when I say I'm stressed out, I have more control because I can try to do things to de-stress myself. When I say I'm depressed, that's a whole new ballgame. I have no idea of what to do. So making that transition to say that I am depressed without the facilities to get treatment, or isn't that a dangerous thing in Belize?
Well, it could potentially be, but it's a conversation that probably needs to be had, even if it's dangerous, and things need to come into play as, okay, what can we do to help people? When people get depressed, sometimes they're probably going to be calling off of work a lot more.
Yeah.
So your business is losing more money, right? Because then you're not getting the people in work to be able to, do what they need to do. Things are piling up. So it could definitely become more of a problem over time as opposed to just a current situation, because it becomes a ripple.
I want us to get into the work the workshop coming up. But in terms of the triggers of mental illness, are there things that actually triggered? And I'm thinking of two, like relationship problems and money are probably two, but are those like the two biggest?
Well, it could be an array of different things that triggers depression. Some people are probably not happy with who they are. Self-esteem issues can trigger depression. The social media now is really creating this comparison thing between people. Oh, I don't look like that person, so I'm not good enough. So I'm just thinking about that hereditary. If you have a parent or a grandparent, a history of people in your family that have suffered from depression, that have suffered from a mental health issue, then it puts you at a higher risk to experience things like that. Coping mechanism, learning how to cope with the things that come up in our life, and being able to cope with them well. Some people don't have that resilience kind of bounce back effect. And so they, instead of bouncing back from whatever they're experiencing, they get sunk even deeper into it. So it's understanding the different dynamics of that. Triggers definitely domestic violence situations. I mean, if you're in a relationship where you're significantly being abused every day, or just feeling like you cannot do anything right for your spouse, that can be a trigger for depression, because then it's making it seem like, oh my goodness, like I'm not good enough, you know, as a wife or as a husband. You're thinking, what can I do to make this person happy? Constantly walking on eggshells because you don't want to get in a fight. That can trigger someone to get depressed, because you're in a situation where you feel like you can't be yourself, right? And then if a spouse is depressed, then what is that doing to the children in the home?
Yeah.
You know, it's like children model after what the parents are going through, right? And oftentimes children blame themselves, so then they're the ones end up getting, you know, anxiety and depression over whatever it is families going through. Financial, that's a big one. Medical, you know, medical issues, medical bills, things like that. And just the overwhelming life stressors, the everyday stressors. Some people can handle it, some people have a difficult time. Substance abuse issues, right? You know, addiction issues, that can also drive depression. So,
Doc, can I get this one in quickly? Which was, as you were talking just now, as we move into a cyber society and away from actual interaction, isn't that adding to the problem? Because you were talking about the resilience that we have. You go to the market and you're bartering for an extra planting, and it gives you the ability to bounce back when you're rejected. You walk down the street and you meet somebody you don't like and you speak to them. But now we are all boxed in. We're at home, and even at home we're all stuck on these electronic things. We're not talking, we don't have the real life interaction. Is the cyber reality of life, let me say it another way, is the absence of real social interaction, us going to the park, us playing sports rather than playing sports on video games, is that actually compounding a problem, and will it get worse?
Yes, it really is. Human relationship is important. You have to have that connection, that ability to communicate and really feel accepted or wanted. And so if you're on a phone can let you feel wanted. It can't let it can't talk and respond to you and have that interaction. So yes, if
but 5,000 likes can.
The problem is those likes are only on the computer. But if you have 5,000 likes and no human interaction, and no one in real life is like liking you and hugging on you and loving on you and showing you support, then you're actually losing. You know.
Are we being nostalgic, thinking that some of the things, because whatever is your new normal, if I grew up with only books, I love to read, and if you grow up now with a computer and you're playing Fortnite and you're doing all of these other things, that is their normal. But how can you help them not necessarily feel guilt or strike a balance between that and human interaction, for example?
Well, there is definitely, you can have a balance. I mean, you can limit your kids' time or limit your time on, you know, say specifically dinner is going to be family together sitting at a table. this is going to be our thing every night, right? It's not going to be where you're over there watching TV, I'm here, you go in your room. We're all going to make this time, and you got to work towards it now. Like when I was growing up, that was the thing. We all sat at the table and ate. But now it's like you got to work to do that. It's like completely flipped the other way around. And so you kind of have to actually make an effort to say, this is our family time together, and this is what we're going to put in that time, because you want to build that resilience. You want to let your loved one know that you're there for them. You're there to support them, and they can come and talk to you. And if you don't have that interaction, you don't have time to build that connectedness, right?
And there's certain things that are just irreplaceable, like the human touch.
Yeah.
A hug. No matter you get 50 likes, that's not the equivalent.
it's
And like you were saying, just words of affirmation and the personal touch, because no matter who we are, I think we will understand that social media is fake. I mean, deep down we know you'll be friends with 5,000 people on Facebook, and you walk down the street, and some of the people who are like you on Facebook, just like to this, as somebody posted this morning, won't say hi.
Yeah.
And that I think will never change.
Exactly.
But the workshop, how did it come about? How did you guys link up, and why do you think that this topic of improving professional development and mental health in the workplace is the topic and the thing to have right now?
Well, that's a good question. I always wanted to find an avenue how employers and administrators and supervisors and managers would understand their workers. Because for me, I believe that a lot of these persons that are up above us, where we would call the managers, and them, they are not understanding the little man and what they're going through. And then I have a bank, and every time I go to this bank, I just say a new face. So I just say, you have so many turnovers. Then one of our members was telling me about their workplace having so many turnovers. That means, for me, that environment is very hostile and it's not healthy. And even myself, I have worked in areas whereby I have not felt comfortable and happy, and no one care that, oh, well, you're maybe depressed, or maybe you have anxiety, and you're just working because at the end of the day, you know you have certain commitments that you have to meet. And that is very sad. So while I was online, her relative, he did a fundraising for us at DJ Super P. Thanks. And he said, I have this cousin and she wants to come back to Belize and give back to Belize, and she's a Belizean, and she's detailed with X, Y, and Z, and he lists her criteria. And I said, well, that's good. And he said, link her on Facebook. And I linked her.
Positive.
And when I linked her, we started to talk about it, and then her and I been constantly in communication with what should be the topic and what should we be based on. And for me, this was my way of voicing that in Belize, we have so many persons that are working unhappy. But then the managers don't care because they're getting their numbers and their money. But then while human resource is the most important resource, and you cannot replace those persons just because you may say you don't like how that person responds. If I could give you an example, I had a time when I just simply break down at work. I'm a teacher at day, and what that did was affect my entire class, because students, because I'm a teacher, I have little ones that are looking up to me. But did the administrators see that if you as a teacher, you're stressed and you're depressed and you have anxiety or you have this mental break, that it's affecting your class? I don't think that they're seeing that. So when I left, that entire classroom crumbled. Wow. And it was so sad. But I had to get myself together. I had to check myself. But then no one cared. And that was the sad part. And so when I was looking at this mental area, I said, this is the area that I really want to touch. My bank has so many turnover. This business place that I go have so many turnover, and it's very sad.
Now, based on what you just said, the world is not a nice place, right? And very often when you show up at a job, people don't truly ask you how are you to find out how are you, right? So how is it idealistic to say that when you go to a workplace, people will be looking at each other to kind of find out your mental health and to have human interaction and to do so many other things that doesn't seem to be the norm anymore? You may be accused of being too nice, you know, and nauseating because you're always asking and doing this, etc. So is it?
I think as she mentioned is that you kind of want to make sure that you have a positive environment because you don't want your employees to become significantly overwhelmed with what they're doing and have a breakdown, because then it's like you lose. In the end, you lose because now you gotta search for a new teacher for students, and time's going, so these students are losing a lot of important essential things that they really need to be getting. And so employers losing and having employers losing and having high turnovers, they're actually kind of probably putting themselves in the hole more, because it'll take more time to replace that person and having to retrain and having to do a lot of things that takes time. Whereas if you nurture the employees that you have and really make sure they're doing okay, and that can be simple as having a team building once a month, you know, for, you know, kind of how are you guys doing, a check-in with your staff, right? Making sure they're okay. And even if you don't want to do it, just say, you know what, I have resources here. If you guys are not feeling well, you know, here's, the wellness office, or here's the wellness place that you can go and talk to someone. Even if it's just that, providing them with an outsource and letting them know it's okay if they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed to just go and kind of take care of themselves. Self-care.
What would be your advice to employers in terms of creating that kind of environment? What are some of the simple things that don't detract from productivity? Because that's what a lot of people are more concerned about, employers, that they're getting bang for buck, you know?
Exactly. I totally understand. It's just, you know, like I said, doing something once a month with your employees. Or even, you know, checking in, sending an email, sending something that is positive for the morning, every morning, or just something that really is kind of going to get them to feel like you actually care about them putting in the time at your facility, right? I appreciate you coming into work every day. And sometimes it's the smallest thing that make an employee feel like, okay, I'm glad that I came into work. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming, or you're getting a $500 bonus or anything like that.
That would be good.
But, I mean, yeah, that would be good. That would be great. But
can I say one thing? I see in Belize that the employer rather you work than having how would you say it, a mental wellness environment. And that is the sad part. I work by day, and all I am seeing myself doing is just lesson plan work, not meaning to bash my workplace, but then we're not having any gathering. I don't know even half the teachers that I'm working with. And what I explained to a manager that called for this particular workshop, I said, how much of your staff do you know? Knowing your staff is not just coming and knowing their personality or say, oh, that one likes snap, that one like behave so and so, because the same one that likes snap might could work good, and you might cannot replace that. And I said, but it comes from when you're young. For me, I always mention that I was raised in a favoritism home. So for me, if I see my boss or my manager, my administrator constantly going to this particular employee and their body and kumbaya, I know that if I have any differences with that employee, I'm already in a favored position. So I will either have to shut up, be quiet, or keep my my complaints to myself. For me, I believe that mental health is very important. I have transferred myself from schools because if my mental health is not at 100, I do not find myself working there anymore. And that's the message that I want people to know. Your mental health is very important. You breaking down and you doing this will not solve anything at that location that you're at. And at the end of the day, your commitments will still be met, but your mental health is very important. That's the most important health factor that that is out there now.
But if we can't all pack up, I fully subscribe to what you do. If I'm not happy in a job, I'm one of those people who, throughout my life, I will just leave, exactly. Right, and find something else. But a lot of people don't feel that brave to actually just pack up and start over and do something completely new that pushes them out of their comfort zone. So how do you encourage people to do those kinds of things? Or if you're unable to leave a job, how do you take care of yourself, right? How do you manage other people and what people say? Belize is a very small society, so I know Kevin, and on the weekend when I see Kevin and he's out wasted, I can take it to the workplace, you know. Boy, I see you, you know, I am a black up, I am a this. So I might not interact with him the same way if I see him being, let's say, lawless on the weekend or unprofessional, you know. So because of that, people tend to, you know, feel judged more. People feel to be themselves more, because you know that if you are the person who stole a crab when you were 3, when you die, then I say, oh, that I'm the one who steal the crab, you know. Yeah. So we have a society like that, but how do you get people to take care of themselves in spite of everything, even if you can't be brave enough to just pack up and leave a toxic situation?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most important things is really understanding self-care and really leaving work there. Work can be stressful. I mean, I've been in situations where I felt completely burned out, and it's like, you know what, it's time for me to move on. Like, this is really burning me out. So you kind of have to strategically make a plan. And I think I personally made a strategic plan over the course of 3 years. Okay, I'm gonna get myself together. I will go back to school, professional development. I will get my degree. And then once I accomplish that, okay, I want a new job. I'm going to go and test the water. So I kind of taught one class while I was working a full-time job. And I went and I taught this one class and I really liked it. I'm like, okay, this is something that I can transition into full-time. So it's really planning, strategically planning your exit. And sometimes that means professionally developing yourself, continuing your education. It's an extra sacrifice that you might have to make, but I wouldn't just encourage anybody who probably have a lot going on financially, you have kids and family and all of that, to just quit, because then you probably put yourself more in a hole and get even worse, because now you're like, oh my God, everything is on top of me or falling apart. But you make a strategic plan, you professionally develop yourself the best way that you know how. Continuing education, get a specialized certification or, you know, specialization in something else, and really kind of build on what you already have to develop and eventually plan your exit.
You know, it's I think it's poetic that the example that's brought up is teachers, because teachers go through a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And the stress it comes from society, then it comes from the education system, and it comes right down through your principal, which is exerted on the, and then even in terms of the policy, I just read something that they're taking away a portion of the teachers. Yeah. So even what they do to de-stress, it's a very toxic formula. Yeah. And we have to commend teachers for putting themselves above that, because you're not even talking about teaching an 8-year-old yet who has no discipline at home, if that's the challenge that the child is having. So, but where we are as a country, and you were talking about the fact that all they want is production out of you. Where we are, it almost sounds like we're still in the industrial era and we have not moved past, you know, where just, all I needed to do is to just staple this on the shoes, pass it to the next person, then I staple on the sole, and that kind of thing. How do we take that cultural shift? Because I don't think the system will change. That's our educational system, where the industrial, probably pre-industrial stage. But in the workforce, surely it's just about production. There's no time to hear about what your issues are. There's no time or money for a wellness center or location. How do we operate in this culture, which I don't see, and I'm trying to be optimistic here, it changing any at all?
I don't really, I'm not very familiar, but I think that just advocacy on your part. I mean, what the teachers are doing, you know, kind of advocating, I see it a lot sometimes.
Last week we did medical rounds at workplaces in Belmopan, because that's where the headquarters for the organization is. And you have some very, like, if you have went to builders, sorry to put it out there, Michelle Usher, but they have very nice staff. They're very lovely. And as Miss would gather them and ask them what is their issue or what would the problem is be, when we did the glucose testing and everything like that, she actually made them their own gym. They ask for these things. Simple thing like those, let an employee feel appreciated. I think it's like that. You just giving everyone a chocolate with I was a school coordinator, and I used to put a little paper and I used to say, "You have been so sweet, take a treat." And I just send that around to each teacher. And those simple tactics make people feel special and important. Because then at the end of the day, human resources is one of the greatest resources, and that is what employers need to understand. Like what Miss said, you can let them go, or they can be burnt out and they can go, and you will have to get another one and start back over from scratch and retrain them. But why don't you help the ones that you have there right now? I asked a manager yesterday, I said, "How well do you know your employers?" And he said, "Well, Miss, well, I have someone with this and that." I said, "You know why he may be acting that way? Do you know why she may be acting that way?" "No, Miss, because X, Y, and Z." I said, "Miss, because you did not took the time out to get to know that person well. You're not jumping at their business, but you as a manager, as an HR personnel, you need to know who you're dealing with. Because then what might make me snap because of something psychologically that affects me might not make her snap." And this is the environment that we're living in. The educational part has been lacking. And that's the reason for the workshop.
All right, so we have to unfortunately bring this to a close. So it's this Friday?
This Friday at ITVET. And it starts at 8:30 and it ends at 4. And it is certified. You will be fed juice, meals, snacks, everything is catered. Miss Dr. Kendra Flores-Carter will be the presenter for this event, and at the end you will be certified.
Who are you targeting? Who should be going to this?
I mean, I think that it's open to the public. Anyone who wants to really professional develop
even
themselves, come
Nice.
and want
I like
to
that.
learn more about how they can grow in your place of employment. If a manager has an employee that he sees is a star and you really want to develop this person, how do you do it? You want to, but you don't really know. You'll come, you get some kind of ideas on how to do that, right? Effective leadership, organizational leadership, communication, you know, things like that.
Well, we want to wish you the best with
you.
this initiative. Keep up the good work, Kayla.
Thank you.
And Kendra, welcome home.
Thank you.
And
Happy to be
of
here.
course, we hope that people go out and support. So
And
this
don't-
Friday, 8:30 to 4 p.m. The cost is $100 for non-members, $80 for members. You can go for an entire day to learn how to improve your mental health and improve the mental wellness of your workplace.
Yes.
We're gonna go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, it will be to sit down and speak with representatives from Smart Belize. Don't go anywhere. Open Your Eyes continues after these messages.